All right. Okay, so so lots of fun. So biological contagion. So this is obviously, well, this is always relevant. It seems to be more relevant this year. And then we'll see how this connects to social contagion. So lots of, you'll hear, right, so we talk about computer viruses, things spreading like wildfire. I'll talk about that a little bit. We take that analogy very far straight away. And is it relevant, right? Is it a reasonable thing to do? It's definitely good, colorful, metaphorical kind of stuff. That's all good for us too. I can't attach this thing to myself. Yes, I can. Okay. Yeah, we'll see how things spread. All right. What else has happened on our tweeters? Okay, yeah, more slides are coming out. This is good. Good. Something to do with fish. What else? There's a crowdsourcing piece. This is related to the DARPA thing we talked about, the whole red balloons business. This was another DARPA challenge. It was, so shredding paper, right? You can kind of see what they're trying to get at here. So you've got documents that have been shredded and you have to put them back together. So how do you do that? And so there are some methods that were purely computational. You digitize the whole thing, or that's what they give you already, and you figure out some algorithm to try and patch it all together. And there was a crowdsourcing effort as well. They ended up coming sixth, and the problem was people were putting things together. It's a good thing to read this. They were working together, so 300 or 400 people who were starting to, it's this horrible jigsaw puzzle essentially. And there were increasing orders of difficulty, more shredded basically, right? More horrible little pieces. But then someone from another team just got in there and started to mess with it because it was open, right? So that happened, if you recall, in the red balloon one. I don't know if I said this, but people were starting to mess with the MIT team. They were starting to put in false stuff, like spam it. And the thing they did, they had an easy fix there, which was if they looked at the IP addresses. So if someone sent in a guess for a particular balloon and they weren't in that state, I think they just maybe something even as broad as that, then they ignored it. So that solved a lot of troubles. But here they got messed. So people, so imagine you're making a big jigsaw puzzle, lots of people are helping, and there are online versions where you can do collective jigsaw puzzles, which are kind of fun. And then someone just comes along and starts to, hide them on top of each other, because you can do that with, so they were hiding them on top of each other. They were putting them off the screen so no one could see it. Anyway, it destroyed the thing. All right, other things there, always fun. Robots evolving to be evil, that's good. Good to know. All right, so biological contagion. So we're going to play around with this. We have a few things. I think that works. Cool. Good. Okay, yeah. Pumpkins. All right. Okay, so there's going to be another set of slides on social contagion, but I'll talk a little bit about it in general, contagion in general. And really what this part will be about is, let's move away from the simplest model. I'll tell you what the simplest model is. It's been around since the 1920s, actually. So what the simplest model is for spreading, and it gives you a good story straight away, and that's fine. But it's been essentially taken too far. People still use it as well, I'll show you exactly what I'm trying to say. But they sort of take this very simple model and try to apply that to really complex things. And it's this fault of wanting to measure a system with one number. Because that's really good for people further up the chain, right? You go and tell the president that, Ebola is a 5, on a scale of something to measles, right? And whatever that is. And that should mean something. And we'll show that that's kind of wrong. Okay, so as I said, lots of metaphors, right? So is Harry Potter some kind of virus? This thing definitely spread and people love it and talk about it and so on. They play Quidditch for some reason. Like Middlebury had the world championship, right? Yeah. No one was arrested, so, Sudoku, right? That took off recently. There are many, many things you can think about. That's been a recent, crosswords have been a big thing. That took off 1920s or 30s. Started in the US, I think. There are different origins. Cryptic crosswords, which I highly recommend. This one's from The Guardian. That's an English, an accident of the English. So, people love these things. So how does it spread though? What's, when someone gets activated in some way, is the same model that we use for diseases or simple models, does that work? Does that apply? And that would be, fundamentally interesting, of course. It's very helpful for marketers. It's helpful if you want to save the world by spreading education and something. There are good reasons to spread things. And there are, messages that aren't so good. So language, right? So if you look in Glick's book, the Information, nice little piece, he says starts to talk about the origin of the alphabet, and it just materializes at some point, and then gets all these different variations of it. But he has this one little sentence: the alphabet was contagious. Once this was sort of figured out as a way to do things, this was great. And different languages have, Chinese and Japanese have different backgrounds for sure. So there's different choices there. That people have been able to work with. But the alphabet was sort of only invented once, is the idea too. Like all these variations are, right? Alpha, beta, it's the Greek. Religion spreads in some way. Democracy, maybe? Is it infectious? I don't know. How much do you have to make that thing spread? How much do you have to kind of, how much dosage do you have to put out there? So you see, and I'll call these naturomorphisms, right? So the feeling was contagious, spread. The news spread like wildfire, so let's use a very physical, obvious sort of thing. Now that's pretty much a 2D situation, right? So that's a front in 2D, and that may be entirely applicable to the early plagues that spread across Asia and Europe, and was also generally referred to as, by whichever people, by the people it came from, right? It's the Spanish flu or the such and such flu. It was those guys that made us sick. So that kind of spreading, and if you look at it, kind of has a real 2D front. It's spreading out because people weren't getting on planes, and there were horses and things like this, but things were being spread in different ways. Bit slower. So here you go. Freedom is the most contagious virus known to man. So maybe not. But people try to. But again, this language, right? Virus and contagious. Nothing is so contagious as enthusiasm. I don't know. That's not for everyone. Well, certainly, so this fellow, Ambrose Bierce, does anyone know the Devil's Dictionary? Ambrose Bierce is an American, 1800s, wrote this, smart aleck kind of dictionary, which, it's sort of in that Mark Twain kind of era of being Oscar Wilde, They would have loved Twitter, these characters. So everything's beautiful, including what is ugly, everything good, especially the bad and everything. That's right. It is hereditary, so this is optimism. That's the definition of optimism. It's hereditary, but fortunately not contagious. So, different points of view about this. And now we have some studies, right? These are people just making things up. We have studies more recently saying happiness is contagious. Also divorce is contagious. There are these kind of funny studies that have come out in the last, and we'll get to that in Social Contagion, that are controversial. They're based on, they're starting to be based on lots of people, lots of data. But our measurement based on Twitter, or in that case it's the Framingham Heart Study, it's still some view into what many people are doing, right? We've suddenly got data sets with hundreds of thousands of people, or millions of people, or hundreds of millions of people. So that's, that starts to suggest we can really do something, but it is just still one view of it. Anyway, but the window's open, essentially. It wasn't before. Hoffa. There was a grandeur I don't know if you know this character, this fellow was a stevedore, so he worked on the docks in San Francisco, and basically wrote these books that people, became quite famous, and people were really taken by them. He was sort of an aphorism generating machine. And this is after, so there's the Second World War, and after that, people are worried about the spread of communism, and not the spread of democracy, right? So he wrote a lot about that. So there's a grandeur in the uniformity of the mass. When a fashion, a dance, a song, a slogan, a joke, again, it's sort of the 50s, sweeps like wildfire. We have wildfire again. One end of the continent to the other. And certainly this is in the age of media, right? So this is not, there are newspapers, there are people on TV 50s are starting to be on TV. So wildfire is not quite working. Or it's wildfire on a particular kind of network. 100 million people roar with laughter at the same time. Hum one song or break forth in anger and deny, there's a unification There is an overpowering feeling in this country, so it's the US. We have become nearer to the brotherhood of man than ever before, obviously the male focus. But, this contagion, it gives you this great, great power. All right. So interesting character, sort of, it's worthwhile looking through this, the true believer. So this is not science, right? This fellow's just sort of writing these ideas out, talking about mass movements. So we can be absolutely certain about only about things we do not understand. So these have a contagious element to themselves, right? They're aphorisms, we like to spread those. Even when they completely, look before you leap, and he who hesitates is lost. I mean, they're completely opposite stories, but we can trot them out. They're tiny little narratives. They're tiny little stories, essentially. Like these are small descriptions of big stories. Mass movements can rise and spread without belief in God, but never without belief in a devil. Good theory. Hypothesis, let's use that word. Where freedom is real, equality is the passion of the masses. Everyone wants to be the same, or equality becomes a thing, and where equality is real, freedom is the passion of a small minority. So you can, this is not necessarily right, but these things get picked up. Despair.com, the despair, right? So there's what are the other ones called? What's that poster? The motivation ones, right? Yeah. Yeah, so these are the demotivation ones, which are from, right? So conformity, and the quote they have here for these characters is from Hoffa, right? When people are free to do as they please, they usually imitate each other. So, and he's being very serious, and it's not unreasonable. Imitation is one of our great, great abilities, actually. I mean, right? Our ability to mimic and copy is fantastic. Well, we're pretty impressed with parrots that can tell us what our great-grandparents said because they're 150 years old. Disturbing curse words from the 1910s or something. But we are very, very good at imitation. Never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups. That's another good one. I don't think he said that. Example. All right. Okay, so I've got a couple of videos. So this is going to be the spreading of buildings. You can probably figure out. So let's see if you can figure this out. You may have seen this little thing. It's been around for a while. I won't show you that other one. Okay, so it starts in geography. Is
that Walmart?
Yeah. Which started in, that's one of those, which one? There's a map. At least know your own states. I don't care if you don't know where India is. I understand it. So in Australia, you have to learn geography because you have none. So, you're very interested in the rest of the world. But, there's a lot in the US, so it's complicated. But it is always amusing. I know. Well, it's cut off at grade 2. It's like, we're done, yeah. Right. Let's start again. All right. Who can figure out this? Okay, I'm sure you do. Someone must. Come on. Where's our first dot? Arkansas. All right, there you go. So we're not going to do it. We won't put. So it's 1967. So you get the last state to get it was Vermont. So it would be the last to get, which is this is spread very 2D wise, right? This is just a front going out because it's based on trucks, and there was a real center to it, and they didn't create a new center and say, let's work from here. This is actually, it's got a very stylized, a very sort of 2D simple kind of spread. Yeah, Vermont was the last. Vermont, Trader Joe's just came to Vermont. What else? Ebola will probably, bide its time before it, race through Alaska, and it'll get to Nome, Alaska before it gets to Burlington. Oh, well, okay, yeah, we could be lucky. Okay, right. Right, we'll see. I don't know. Okay, here's another kind of spreading. This is the spreading of spreading. Spreading. The corporatization. These are obscure terms. Corporate. right? You say someone's looking very, corporate, like, big-ish. So this is a percentage of people overweight or obese. So it's bad, I mean, this is famously known to be bad, but it's this is 1985 CDC. So you can see there's no data here, and then it starts to creep in. And you know your states, so you can figure out. Colorado has always been, so these ones go into the next category, kind of a dark maroon or something. This is the highest category. Colorado was hanging on at the end, and that was 1997. Is that the last one? No. It got to 2006 or something. So that's a different kind of spreading, right? There's a lot of stuff that's behind that. Yeah. Leading the way, yeah. I mean, the statistics are not great for certain places. Okay, so there's lots of different kinds of spreading. There's another one you could look at. Let me change this page. This is a viral Get Out the Vote video. It's from 2008. It was well done. You could look at that later. Should we look at that? Do you want to look at that? No. Okay.
See Dracula. I make love to ladies.
This is, let me get this to work. Why doesn't this work? Okay, I'm going to make something work, maybe. Adobe Reader exploded into flames. Great. Wow. What am I doing? Okay, 1 second. Wow, that wasn't good. That was bad. Wow. Nope. Wow. 1 second. Sound. Out. Output. Okay. Okay. This is from a particular show. I'll have a few little excerpts from it. It's from a Halloween episode. All right, so they're trapped in this is a community college, they're trapped in it, and everyone else is turned into a zombie per some excellent disease. All right, okay. So we'll see how this ends.
Imitation only takes minutes. First you get a stomach ache, then your skin turns red, followed by cold sweats, muscle spasms, high fever, then the uncontrollable urge to bite and infect the flesh. Oh, jeez.
Special? You're not special. I'm special. I was bit 10 minutes ago and I'm...
Nobody's special, very important.
I hate you less now. That's how much I hate your normal self. You have to destroy the brain.
Okay, so zombies. So this is a bit of a problem, right? Zombies. This start actually it's only up to 2000. Like this is Google Books, the Ngram viewer. So it gets a bit messier here, but clearly this is a bad situation. My wife is a slush reader for a particular sci-fi fantasy short story thing. So she reads 5 or 6 stories a day, 5 stories a day, and then pass them on to the editor, sort of thing. And she writes too. So, but that's one of their rules: no zombies, no zombie stories. It's done. So maybe we've hit peak zombie. But World War Z, what's that? 3-4 years ago. I mean, that's a full-on. Let's do the whole zombie thing, make them run fast. All right. So zombies have taken over. That's pretty bad. All right. So lots of different things. It's a bit of a confusion of metaphors, and clearly things spread, right? And so I guess what should be absolutely clear is spreading is one of the most important things in systems that there is. And you start with diffusion, and the simplest thing is just diffusion, stuff just spreading around, even just on the beach or whatever, just stuff spreading around. It is just a very basic aspect, through the ducts or whatever. There's nothing wrong. It is a fundamental piece. All right, so contagion. So it is the process, definition-wise, the process, right? It's the spreading of something between individuals in a population. And there are two very important aspects, right? There's individual-to-individual interactions that help spread it, which we believe, for example, Ebola has to be done like that. And then there's airborne, right? So the stuff that's mediated through an environment. And then, of course, it can go through different species. And so then you have different kinds of, we like to say vectors, don't we? All right, so it could be the disease itself, the dreaded lurgy, the plague, so we can talk about that. So we use it in these different ways. Together to touch, right? So it's actually the origin of this word is about spreading through person-to-person interactions. So, or individual-to-individual interactions. So contagion, if you're going to say something's contagious, it usually elicits disease. We want to think about things in general. Contagious, some good things might be contagious, and of course that might be a sort of point of view, but spreading is a neutral word, right? It's not as exciting. Okay, so we'll say contagion. That's better in paper titles and, okay. Saying you're a contagion expert, much better. Okay, so, and one of the things we're going to get to in this piece is, how big is this, really a fundamental question is, how big is this outbreak going to be? So, obviously with Ebola now, that is the question you want to ask and you want your experts to answer. And really only until the last 10 years, no one's been able to say anything. With earthquakes, and of course some of us have ended up in jail in Italy for getting this thought to be wrong, but we have a characterization of how, still it's messy, but we have a characterization of it. So we can say with some probability it's going to be like this. We can do it with weather. Again, messy, but we can say with some probability there'll be rain and some probability there'll be this and that. We've developed a feel for what it should be like. But with spreading, we really had no idea. With disease outbreaks, we had no idea. And certainly we don't know with social contagion, right? So we don't know which book will be a bestseller. And that's sort of proven over and over again by by editors rejecting books that eventually become famous, or rejecting musicians who become famous eventually, right? So it's very hard to guess that sort of thing. Okay, so there are two classes that we'll talk about: infectious diseases, and so these are all these good things, obviously zombies. Social contagion, and social contagion is really, you go from everything. Fashion you could say is not, it's incredibly important, right? There's a gigantic industry with fashion, so this is a very important thing. Word usage may feel, some of these things may not feel so important, but we end up saying like all the time because that started somewhere, and just using words in the first place. So lots of, and then the much more serious things, or things that have sort of obvious serious aspects associated with them, and depending on which side you're on, doesn't matter, I suppose. Rumors, gossip, there's stuff that may feel like it's low level. Lots of things spread. Right, and as I said, there are stronger claims now, like obesity spreads socially, and happiness spreads socially, and so on, right? So they're pretty strong. With the obesity one, obviously, the unfortunate immediate response that people have had, whether this is right or wrong, is, and kind of the correct deduction, unfortunately, is that you should then only be friends with people you want to be the same shape as, right? Because, all right, but we'll see it's unfounded. All right, so, okay, simplest model. Well, I'll give you two versions. There's a continuous one and a discrete one. Of course, we started with continuous because we live in the world of differential equations. So it's referred to as the SIR model, not the SIR model, the SIR model. 3 states: susceptible, infective, and infectious. So here are your people who are not zombies. Here are the zombies. And recovered can mean different things, right? So, or the R can mean different things depending on your little model. It could be removed or refractory. Removed is a clinical way of saying dead, probably, right? Or it could mean immune. Immune. You've had chicken pox, you're not going to get it again. But now you're open to, say, shingles, right? So, I mean, there are certain, lots of diseases have different, there are a number of very different kind of paths that you can take with diseases. You can have, and I guess I'll say this, you can have exposed, so you have it, but you're not infectious yet. And the more clever, and this is sort of a funny, I guess I should be careful with that, but certain diseases have evolved that are more successful, right? You don't appear to have you don't have any symptoms, but you're infectious. That's a good disease in terms of, from the disease's point of view. So HIV, obviously, is a dramatically awful example of that. And Ebola was at the other end. And now it seems that it's because it's less, that this version of it is less dangerous, actually. It's not as, the fatality counts are lower, or the chance of dying is lower, so it means it can kind of get a little further, instead of just burning out immediately. All right, so we'll sort of, here's immediately where it kind of goes wrong in terms of trying to think about how far something will spread, because the kinds of models that people play with, well, let's say we've got a fraction of the population is susceptible, and a fraction is infected, and a fraction is refractory. So you've already taken n, the number of people, out of it. Somehow you sort of have to figure that out later on. Anyway, so really key part of it presumes that the interactions are random. These original models do, and many models that have come after it. There are so-called, I'll say it again, but compartment models where you say, okay, well, it's obviously not everyone's interacting randomly, but let's put people in different categories. So we might break them out by age. So it's not actually a network structure or anything. We'll just have a box of people who are, like school kids, and then parents, and then grandparents, say something like this. And then they have different interaction rates within their different groups. And then they have interaction rates across. So it's sort of, it's not really a network story, but there's a mix, different kind of levels of mixing. But it does presume in general random interactions. And that they're independent, right? So there's no memory. Now you can add that in, so someone gets infected, that's, you can certainly add this in. We'll do it in one way. But I guess we won't do it in this example. Yeah, okay, that's a different thing. So if someone who's infected has bumped into you, the zombie has tried to bite you, and you get away, then you should have a memory of that. But these models, you don't have a memory of that, right? So there's no, if they bite you a little bit, you don't get any dose. It goes away, right? So if you have failed interactions, there's a failed transference of the disease, there's no memory. So that's obviously a little funny, and it's completely wrong for social contagion, right? Because you remember things, and advertisers play on that, and people trying to sell you their belief system play on that. They want to keep telling you the story. People who are trying to teach you, how to do integrals do the same thing, or they repeat. Well, it's sort of gone out of flavor, hasn't it? Yeah. Anyway, obviously we can have all sorts of flavors, but just discrete and continuous. So let's make a little discrete example. So it's a little automator of sorts. So we have some fraction of the population here, the susceptibles, the infecteds, the refracteds, and there's a clock, right? So there's a clock. We're just going to make a little one that we can put on a computer. And there's some probability that as a susceptible, so you're randomly mixing, and the nice thing about this chalk. S plus I plus R equals 1 is that we can use these as probabilities. So if you're going to randomly, so here's the susceptibles, the infecteds, and the randoms, the recovered. If you randomly select an individual, the probability that you randomly bump into an infected is just the fraction of infected, right? So mechanically it works very nicely. So with probability I, you select you're someone bumping into someone, okay? And then with probability beta, that infected interaction is successful. Yeah, yeah, or you're dead. That's all. That also works too. So the disease does its thing. Yeah, but it could be. Yeah, it could be. Okay, and then right. So it's built in here. There's a little dash line. So depending on the disease, sometimes you'll be immune forever, right? So you can imagine this is an immunity state. We can't have two eyes, so that's why this is. You could have an immune state where you stay forever. So chickenpox is kind of an example of that, right? But there are some things where you might recover for a while and then you're prone to it again. And that's definitely true for social contagion. And I'll mention that again. But for say, all sorts of things. But you can imagine reading or seeing a kind of movie, like horror movies or something. Like you watch too many and it's like, oh, I can't sleep anymore, and then you're out of it. Or you're on diets, you're like diet, whatever it is. Sort of behaviors, like classes of behavior. And then you become kind of resistant to it. You try every type of yoga, whatever it is. And then you become, potentially at some point, you're like, I could try it again. So transition probabilities. So beta is the probability that if you've bumped into an infected. So this is going to be a really simple model. We'll just walk through it. Okay. That infected transfers the disease. Then we just have a simple probability of recovering. So if you're infected, you have a probability R of recovering at each time step. So just every chance, every time you get a chance. So you don't have to bump into anyone. It's the interaction between these two that makes it interesting. There's a non-linearity in that because it's these guys are all randomly mixing with each other, and it's how much mixing there is between these two states that drives its evolution. And then rho is for the loss of immunity, if it's there. So again, it's a little simple thing, if that's possible. So rho could be 0, for example. So rho is 0, this is just out, and you stay in this box. Okay. The original models, which are differential equation models, it's 1920s, there's Reed and Frost. That was not actually officially published. There are 3 papers by Comack and McKendrick, which could be a 1980s pop team, but they're not. And the Hall notes of the 20s. There you go. So and they wrote down a couple differential equations, which I think, yeah, here they are. So if you really like these things, you can build it in this way. So the rate of change for susceptibles. Now these quantities are rates, right? So we have again, these are fractions. So this is they're all interacting with each other. This is the fraction of interactions that are between infecteds and susceptibles, right? That's happening all the time. And then with some rate beta, they are susceptibles are becoming infected. So that's a loss to this group, and that's got a counterpart here, right? So these two things are the same. Susceptibles are becoming infected. So this is being drained out into here. There are some that were recovered with some rate rho. The recovereds are joining the susceptible team. There's a rate at which infecteds are becoming recovered. And there's this rate of recovereds goes back up here. So if you add all of these up, these two cancel, these two cancel, these two cancel. So the change in the population is 0, right? So that's right. So the d s plus I plus r is dt is 0. So that's good. You can complicate these things in all sorts of ways, naturally adding more people and taking more people away. Not from being sick or not, but just birth rate and death rate, like a natural background birth rate and death rate. Okay, this is a big deal. So this thing, I'll call it R0. You probably want to say R0, maybe, whatever. Naught is an excellent word. So let's say R0. It's the expected number of infected. So this is a very reasonable thing to ask, right? So someone gets Ebola or measles or some other good thing, and they go about in their daily life or whatever that thing allows them to do. What's the expected number of new people that get infected from that? Now, this is obviously going to be very complicated depending on the society, the culture, and all sorts of things. Are they in hospitals? What's going on? But, distilled down into a nice little model story, this is a reasonable thing to look at. And you end up with this basic story. If R0's greater than 1, because people are randomly interacting with each other, it's going to take off, right? So if it's 2, then on average you cough and splutter and you get 2 more people infected like that. And because they're randomly interacting, we're presuming that just keeps going on. They randomly interact with some other people in the population. Not you, you're not part of that. I mean, it's incredibly unlikely. So they'll get 2 each, and then they'll get 2 each, and it takes off exponentially. Right. So you get exponential takeoff. Let's go through a little calculation to connect, at least in these simple models, R0 with some of these parameters, right? Whichever ones are needed. Oh, excitement. Where is that thing? Okay, it's okay, people. It's going to be okay. Please. Okay, all right. Let's go through the discrete version because this works very similarly for the continuous one. The math this is not bad math. This is quite nice math. Okay, time t equals 0. We have a single, so we have to inject it exogenously, right? Somehow there's a single individual who gets infected. So they're running around the population with I have Ebola on the front of them. We okay?
Being defeated by mandarins.
Yeah, right, that's okay. Small cubes of chocolate. We're almost victorious the other day. All right. You got to play the long game. They're not gonna make it. Okay, so this is a random thing. So and because of this, it's a discrete version. You're going to interact with one other person. We're not thinking of a sort of a continuous soup anymore. We've got individuals, right? So this individual is infected, bumps into someone else, and they're susceptible because everyone else is susceptible at this point, right? It's the initial thing. You've got a sea of susceptibles, and they've never heard of Ebola. It's a terrible thing, Ebola. I can't even, but all right. And there's a probability of transmission beta. Okay, so probably beta you get a +1, someone on your team. Let's say it's your excellent religion. Okay. At time t, no, it's a disease. At time t equals 1, then you have to think about what will happen. Well, I can just say it. So your infective remains infected with probably 1 minus R. So that's important, right? So you've got the initial one who's infected. We're thinking about we're not worried about any new people they infect. Don't worry about them, right? They go off and they get their own fun infecting people, right? It's just this first one. So they get a chance at time t equals 0. Let's just structure it like that. So they have their chance, which may fail or succeed. And then they have to be still sick again at time t equals 1. And that happens with probably 1 minus R, just the way we structure it, right? R is probably recovered. Fine. So at time t equals k, they're still infected with this probability, 1 minus R to the power of k, which is, how's that behave? What sort of function is that? That is a 1 minus R to the k. It's decaying, right? This is smaller than 1. What kind of guy is that one? Thing. What sort of thing? So this is smaller than 1. So the way to do this is it's k ln of 1 over 1 minus R, obviously. Okay, all right. So the minus sign will go here and that will make a 1 minus R on top. E to the ln 1 minus R is this guy, and here's our k. So this is some constant. It's e to the minus k times a constant. So it's decaying exponentially, as this graph suggests. Okay, so it's not going to be long, right? It's quick. So 1 over R is sort of a characteristic scale. All right, so that's happening. But each time step, this individual is still alive. They have a probability of infecting a new one. So we have a simple thing. So the expected number that this individual gets infected, beta times 1, right? Plus the probability that they didn't recover, times beta again, plus the probability they didn't recover twice. Yeah? Little thing, it's not so bad, right? So beta plus 1 minus R plus, so it's a geometric series, yep. And so what's the sum of those things? We're summing up 1 minus r to the power of k to infinity. Start at 1. What's that thing? Yes, almost right. But this, the multiplying factor is 1 minus r. This is it's like swapping y and x on an axis and hurting people. Which is? Right. So the sum is 1 over 1 minus this character. Yeah. Yep. I know, that was cruel. So, right, 1 over r. Okay, that's good. So, blah, 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 beta over r. So that's pretty good. So the row doesn't matter. People recovering, fine, doesn't matter. This is all about whether they get infected or not. So the typical number, so it's really about the balance of these two probabilities. So if beta is greater than r, you know, this disease is in town. It's, you know, got a real chance, yeah? And we're in trouble. So you have some initial infected fraction, and they're all rampaging around, right? With have you heard about Ebola pamphlets? And the expected number of, you know, the takeoff to start with is that. Why did I do that? Okay, I may fix that up. That's not right. That's not right. Yeah, well, it's beta over r is the good thing. Yeah, some madness down there. Wow, that is a mess. Okay, I'll fix that bit up. That's a disaster. Wow. Oh my God. I need to be able to erase it like this. No. Okay. Okay. Shameful. It's been sitting there for a while. Okay, all right. So we can do the same thing for the continuous version. Now we've got rates, beta and r. Just ignore what happened. I'll edit it out later on, literally. Let's see. So, okay. So this was the main. This is the bigger question. This is the rate of change of the infectives, right? So we have this mass action piece here, which is this nonlinear piece. So that's the growth there, and we're losing some. So there's an I in both of these terms. We can pull that character out here, and we have beta s minus r. Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. And the number of infectives grows if beta times s naught minus r is greater than 0, right? So if this thing is greater than 0, we have di dt is something positive times I, so it's going to take off. And it's going to take off exponentially, right? This will start to change, of course, but we'll just let it be constant to start with because it's a huge sea of susceptibles and a tiny little fraction of infectives. And we get that same story. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So same kind of story as the discrete one. It depends what the initial one is, but that's why when it will take off. So you can. Yeah, all right, I'll fix that up. You can extract these, you can estimate R naught for these simple things. So this is a classic, wow. That is an attempt to put, what's that from? For some reason, oh, it's from, it's from Zombieland? No, which one is it? Which one is the one with, damn. Yeah. Is it Zombieland? Yeah. That's the bit where he explains his rules at the start. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, I forgot about that. I was experimenting with putting it in a tiny plot. Yeah, crazy. Okay, so this is the, wow. His girlfriend has become a zombie. It's a bad moment. Let's see. So this is the kind of thing you get out. We've seen this sort of thing, right? It's a phase transition story, right? So if R naught's less than 1, it doesn't take off. You don't really, there's a little bit of bubbling around, but it doesn't take off. So the fraction that's infected finally is 0. And if it's greater than 1, trouble. Right? If it's just a bit greater than 1, it does take off, but there's a limit. This is a continuous phase transition. Does it say that? Yeah, continuous phase transition. That should stop over there. Check. Zombies or, yeah. Okay, good to know. All right, just checking. Okay, so this pops out of this model. So it's, then you have this thing, well, okay, more complicated ones. Let's get it down to this one number. If we can get an R naught out of it, then this is exactly the game that's being played. So you will see this in public policy. It's about trying to make R naught less than 1 through vaccination, whatever it is, whatever process. Of course, making the disease less virulent through some sort of thing, but vaccination has been our great success, which we've forgotten about. Okay, cool? Simple story. All right, good. So it's a fun idea from a simple model that we get more carried away about. Okay, lots of variants. I've suggested this. SIS, so you're susceptible, you're infected. You immediately, you recover completely, but are susceptible again. These are models that people play around with. SIRS, so you can become susceptible as well. As I said, the compartment models, lots of other categories, so exposed. And you can talk about whether they're infected and exhibiting, so you can do all sorts of things. Recruitment, as I said. Yep. Right, but the basic model is just this SIR thing. Okay, so more spreading, and then I'll have a little example. So we had this one, we had zombie. So this is just about contagion, right? I mean, we know it's a story. You can play the game. Anyone played this game? Yeah. Do you always die or what? Or are you good at it?
Depends on how it goes.
You can make it worse.
How you shuffle.
Okay. You can make it harder too, right? Yeah. Yeah, I played it once and died. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, you could. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you can be a scientist. Okay, let's play around with this a little bit. You can watch me die horribly. So this is something you guys can. I mean, it's a fun little visualization. I think it only works, of course, here in Chrome. Okay, a game about epidemic. Very fun. So you get to do. Let's just do the game. Okay. So let's make a little easy one. So to start with, you get vaccines. So you're allowed to vaccinate some individuals. So you choose, right? You think, all right, well, maybe this one matters, and then they disappear, right? So they can't spread through them. This is a very dopey disease because once it takes off, it just infects all the neighbors. There's no the probability of infection is 1. Is there a time? I should stop talking. It'll get really bad. All right. So let's break that open. So now you can quarantine them. So that means you're allowed to, but you're in trouble here. No. Ooh. And they're dead. I just gave up. Okay, so you do this. So this is I don't know why it has to do that. Anyway, so that's good. Passed, only 70%. Some people died. So we're going to make some serious decisions here. Let's do it on hard. And so now we have anti-vaxxers. These ones you can't vaccinate them. They won't let you vaccinate, but they will die later on. So, and this is also another thing about it's just hard to see how to break this network up, right? So that's a classic problem in graph theory is cutting networks. Like how many places do you cut before you can break it into 2? Uh-oh. But they're all dead. No! I gave up on those ones. And over here. No. Oh, yeah, see the anti-vaxxer got it? No! Oh, no. But that one's going to get it. See, this clown here is, I'll save one. Oops. How many? Oh, exceeded 40. Okay. Yeah. All right. This is good. This is a nice little touch. They put the vaccine refusers in there. Anyway, so. Right. So if you're in, where? Here? I don't know. Northern California, Marin County, various places. Actually is a strange demographic, right? That makes up the anti-vaxxers. And I mean, I'm just going to, it's just totally bananas. I mean, I'll show you later on, I don't think it'll happen today, but you have data of the epidemics over the last 100 years in certain places, and Iceland has been very good at keeping numbers of how many people died from certain things, and since the 1880s, I think. And you just see measles. And that's a good example of a place where it runs its course and then disappears, and because it's sort of, it's this whole island thing, they could actually trace when it came in. Someone comes in on a boat and it turns out they were sick, and they could really say it was that person who brought it back. And so you see these outbreaks, and then it's gone for a couple of years, and then outbreaks, and then it's whatever it is, the 70s and 80s, whenever the vaccination starts, it's gone. But incredibly now we have pertussis coming back, whooping cough, German measles, rubella, right? Which is terrible if you're a pregnant woman get rubella. It's an awful thing. Measles. I mean, those are truly feared diseases. But if no one has it, you never see anyone with measles, right? So I mean, it can't be that bad. What's that?
We're a victim of our success.
Yes, no, and so it makes sense, but that it could happen. But then so maybe we have to have a whole bunch of people. I don't know what. It's really unfortunate, and there is of course connected in this the whole. I mean, a very important part of this is the autism, the supposed link between the vaccines and autism, and that paper was a Lancet paper, so the two big medical journals in the world, right? The Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine. It was 1997 or 8, I think that paper was published. We could Google, but and it was retracted a couple of years ago. I think that's right. Although I believe the lead author said, no, it's still good, whereas the 13 or 14 other people said, please take it off. But yeah, damage is done. So, all right, so I just saved 46% of the population. Yeah, more than half of them died. So this is a bad situation. 40% is considered a success. Let me plug the battery in. All right, you can play around with that. But you can see that I kind of want to do it again. Can I do it again? Let's do it again quickly. Custom, I guess you could make it much harder. Ooh, that's exciting. Yeah, so the disease itself, all right, let's see if we have a better, let's concentrate. I kind of want to break it up into two big groups, at least. No. All right, you're all dead. That was crucial. No. Oh, that was pretty bad. How many? Okay, all right, 44%. So it's a tough world. Yeah, you don't want these things to take off. No. Oh, this one, I think 46. No, I did it a couple of times, just warming up before the class. I think that's I'm sure the world record for this particular game is much worse. Okay, so yeah, this is a bad game because the probability of infection is 1 once it takes off. Wow, I'm in the wrong place. Okay, once it takes off, it just spreads. There's a clock, but it spreads. Much more like a movie. Okay, all right. Okay, so prediction. I mentioned this before. So that's what you want, right? I mean, and quite rightly, leaders of countries and journalists and those sorts of people will call up the experts and say, how big is this Ebola thing going to be, right? And SARS was probably was sort of the first big example with that. And then we had the various flu, certainly fear of avian flu, swine flu, or H1N1, which on our big Twitter thing, the happiness thing, you can see there's 4 days where it's just occupied with. Twitter has a pretty good ability to forget what happened, right? So, there'll be some mourning of, Robin Williams was talked about for 2 days and gone, like it disappears from the words. There was 4 days in a row. It was very early on in the in Twitter's existence, but 4 days in a row where flu and so on really dominated that story. Yeah, really doesn't persist. Gone. I will say Ferguson actually was a pretty persistent kind of story on Twitter, and that kept saying, I mean, it was a persistent event, but okay. Can we predict these things? And, and again, you can think of diseases. This is obviously just a fundamentally, we want to stop these things from spreading, but can we get a sense of how bad it would be if we don't, enact certain things, if we don't stop flights or whatever we think, might work. If we don't sort of do something about it, how bad could it be? And then from a marketing point of view and all those sorts of things, or spreading information in a good way or a bad way, can we figure this out? So R0, people estimate after, researchers will estimate in various ways, and some of them are kind of terrible. I mean, there is one paper from Science from a few years ago, and I think as I've hopefully illustrated, right, that there's an exponential takeoff with these simple models, right? Once it gets going, you infect 2 people, if R0's 2 people get infected, 4, then 8, then 16, right? It takes off exponentially. So there's the SARS epidemic, which is some weird thing, which I'll show you later on. Essentially, the fit was this. Exponential takeoff, some point in time, they just find where it kind of crosses here. I'm not kidding. This is a Science paper. There were 2 Science papers at the same time with SARS, trying to estimate its R0, which was sort of supposed to be the big contribution, but the other one was much more complicated. It was talking about how people moved around within areas, which you have to do. And we'll do a sort of toy model of that later on. So Spanish flu, these all had about the same R0. It's like 2 or 3. It's not that, in some sense, not that bad. I mean, 2 is bad, right? I mean, that's doubling. That's usually a bad thing. Like, that's what you want your money to have. 2 would be awesome. If you say 200% increase, that's different, right? What am I saying? 100%. All right, 100%. Okay, so Asian flu, so that's 70,000 deaths. These have been in the last century, 34,000. And SARS, of course, we had a different response to these things, but at this point, we also have a much more connected world with a lot more flights. So this SARS was all over the globe at this point, right? So these are very different outcomes, right? I mean, and we know that these things are probably unpredictable and messy, but, well, let's try to deal with this. Okay, as you know, size distributions are important outside of this course because they exist. So earthquakes, city sizes, all these things, fatalities in war, wealth distribution, epidemics, right? Get a lot of power laws, like the power laws, but at least heavy tail distributions. And this is funny. So epidemics, there's not been a lot of work on this. So I'll show you a couple of pieces. There just hasn't been that much. And data is messier because of, quarantine and responses, so it's hard to sort of say this is a pure response to a disease. And you'd need to, unfortunately, kind of run this simulation over and over. Okay, so we'll start this off, and I'll come back next Tuesday, and we'll go through a simple model for this, and then we'll get into social contagion, which is great. Okay, so so we were talking about before. Here's the caseload for Iceland for measles, and it's normalized by the population at the time. The population hasn't grown a lot in Iceland. I think it might have started off around, this is 1890, a couple of 100,000. It's more like, it's about 400,000 now. And because it's a fairly homogeneous population, they've been able to do all sorts of things with gene data, right? I think they've, Excellent, the Icelanders. They figured out the naming thing too, really good. One of the oldest democratic places, good. Let's see, so, and it's cold. So you can kind of think of these as novel, new diseases in a way, right? That's the idea. Like how, obviously, the population is aging, so the people who are, especially children who are prone to this, they're sort of new participants in the let's get horrible measles game. And there you go, it's gone, right? So let's, I mean, you do see people say things like vaccines have never been proven to work or something. Like this is sort of stuff like this. Oh my God. Oh boy. yeah, badness, not much fun, and then, yeah. So there are similar, they have data, the good data. Flu is more complicated because you don't get this, flu is just every year, so you don't get a really good way of separating out and saying these are sort of separate outbreaks. It's just kind of there the whole time, peaking, of course, at certain times of the year. Yeah, so I said there's German measles, what's sometimes called German rubella, whooping cough. Okay, that's these ones, right. Okay, so this is an attempt, these are size distributions, right? Just pure size distributions. There are no logs here. This is I guess I'll have different values for this, but this is a fraction of the population. So that's 10% of the population. Again, everyone's been normalized to their population of that time. Yeah, I guess we had to get population as a function of year. That's true, yeah. Display paper, okay. Yeah, okay. So there's a little break here, right? So there are lots of very small outbreaks. And this is for measles, and then a few, and it's kind of flat. I mean, there just aren't so many out here. These are ones. There really aren't many at all for this one. Lots of small outbreaks, again, lots of small outbreaks, and then it's fairly flat. Now, because everyone loves power laws, you nevertheless try to fit a power law to it because you're crazy, right? So if we do that, it's not so great. So this is, for some reason, S has changed to psi. This is, again, the size. This is this is the same plots as the previous slide, but here's the complementary cumulative distribution in here. It's the little inset. I mean, there are many orders of magnitude, so this is 4 orders of magnitude here. This is some terrible thing to say, well, maybe there are like a couple of scaling regions. The point is to say there's not. I mean, this is just not good scaling. Maybe there's something here and there, but they're not good. Okay. So complementary cumulative, you know about these guys, right? So it's gamma plus 1, minus gamma plus 1. It's possible there's scaling in here, but the values you get are pretty bad. These are gamma, 1.4, 1.13 for low and that sort of flatter range. And so gamma being, this is sort of very unreasonable values of gamma. This is a very strange kind of business. So this is where, to imagine there's really a mechanistic power law sort of story for this is a bit of a stretch. I'll show you what people have tried to do. So 1 is the cutoff, right? So you can't normalize the distribution, as you recall, from, right, when gamma is 1, because now the integral is a log and it explodes. Gamma is 3/2 was the example that we had for the random walk, like the distribution for time that it would take a random walker to come back to where you are. And between 2 and 3 is typically where you see a lot of real world things, right? So that, again, that's the small, mean, large variance statistics of surprise situation. And we're certainly seeing a lot of small events. So if anything, it should be in that category, right? We can't normalize. Distribution is quite flat. So what really seems to be happening is you have lots of things that don't take off, and if they do, it's essentially unpredictable up to some sort of maximum. It's just all sorts of things can happen. So we want to try to understand that from a simple model point of view, why, how that could be manifested. Because the disease is a disease. People are, interacting with each other, they're giving it to each other, but it must be about how they start to move around within that. Okay, so that's an aspect. They are these kind of flat distributions of sizes. And then there's this sort of phenomenon. So SARS, we do have some okay data for it, but obviously there's some limit to reporting by countries and mistakes and so on. This is back in 2002, of course. It takes off and you think this is bad. At this point, right, so we're here in history and we think everyone is going to die. Everyone's going to die. And you start building your bunker full of baked beans. Or you're really happy you built one because you had one from 2000, because of the whole clock thing, right? And you're like, I've always wanted to watch all those, Seinfeld DVDs. Right? Okay, so that's that. And then it starts to go down. You're like, oh my God, what a waste of money. And then it starts to take, and at that point you're like, yes, everyone is dying. That's good. I'm going to go to my bunker. This is very bad. Again, reporting issues is a bit of a problem. Toronto, I think, as an individual city, had this kind of had a shape like that. It said, oh, we're fine, you can come back and visit us. And then it went boop, back up again. So that was sort of bad for them. And then eventually it does go away. And then, strong responses by countries saying, please don't, or stopping borders and things. There are a lot of, so the epidemic slows. So an infective moves to a new context. So you can get these kind of rare events. Someone flies to another country, which has just happened with Ebola. And, there's a list of things you're supposed to answer, but, those things have been asked forever, right? Have you ever been on a farm in the last, that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
You're like, no. And there are extreme ones, right? Have you committed genocide, right? I mean, that is on the list of things. And you're like, no. And the bad guys say, no, But you can get them later on for lying. They can send them to jail for, it's like Al Capone, or in a very different context, Martha Stewart, you don't catch them for what you want to get them for, but you get them for some sort of epi behavior that's related. All right, very clever. Okay, Al Capone, right? Tax evasion. Yeah, not for the murdering of other people or the those things or whatever, but tax evasion. Okay. Okay, so this is called resurgence, and so that doesn't happen in these simple models, which is understandable. So the simple continuous ones, it's just like, the number the fraction that gets infected is absolutely well known. All right, let me finish this and we'll talk about the model on Tuesday. We can start up. Let's finish with this. Okay, this is the next stage. Good. Let me say this. These are these two things we want to get. Resurgence and this kind of unpredictability in the final size, which is a bad story, but it seems to be real. We'll show one more clip. There are going to be a couple more clips from this. This is about where this disease came from. Okay.
The only people getting sick are the ones eating what I bought at your surplus store. What about the taco meat stuff? The classic flavor? The one with the goofy label? Here. Classified Phoenix. If found, repeat key phrase. Echo Tango X-ray 997. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Damn. Okay.
But the only people...
This is important. We're nearly done, people. Come on. What are you doing? Is it going to choke?
But the only people getting sick are the ones eating what I bought at your surplus store. What about the taco meat stuff? The classic flavor?
Just look at the pictures.
Goofy label? Here. Classified Phoenix. If found, repeat key phrase. Echo Tango X-ray 997.
Person biting other person.
Sounds
Yeah.
delicious. Anyway, it looks like taco meat and... Hello?
Greenville Community College.
Speaking.
It's the Special Operations Officer McHenry.
Hi.
I need you to listen to me very carefully.
Okay, yeah. So they're listening. You read out that thing and, all right, fine. All right, it's very silly. So we'll see where that goes. There's ABBA in this show. It's great. They've got ABBA in the background. It's terrific. Yeah, it's an important ad. Also infectious. What's that? He was dressed as Lady Gaga. Yeah, right. That's the dean. The dean of the college is dressed in that way. All right.